So we're talking spring fishing. I'm going to let you get started because you know this just as well as I do. Ice out about 40-ish degrees water, like upper 30s to 40 to 45 degrees.
Well, let me look at this real quick.
You start with that. Okay, we picked Long Pond,
Yep.
West Rutland, Mass. So apologies if this is somebody's honey hole. Not in our intent. If it is, just shut up. And that not like shut up, like don't yell at me in the sense of just don't tell anybody we talked about it. And then nobody will know.
Right.
It's what people don't understand about honey holes. Those guys were fishing my spots, one of the greatest spots in the world. They're blowing it up.
No, we were just
What was the name of that spot again? Because you're the only person that told me what that was.
From experience, this should be a good spot to start because you got deep water here, super shallow. You got the bank here, and you got this flat where it comes down a steep bank and it flattens off. Those fish should be sitting up in this area in here. I mean, once you start getting into those like 50 to 55 degree spots, you can move all the way up into this stupid shallow 4 foot. This is 3 feet up into a foot. You can start working this entire area with chatterbaits, jerkbaits, and all those same baits. I mean, even in here too. Like this is deep, relatively deep for this lake. That's what, 16 or is that 18 feet?
18.
And it comes up to this spot here where it's probably 10 feet deep here. They'll move up from that deep water up onto this small little flat here before they push up, and they could even spawn up in here. It could be a good pre-spawn spot there.
Have you talked about like the northern end versus the southern end? We were talking about this early in the spring.
I have not.
Northern end tends to be your friend more often than not. Wind plays a huge role in positioning and the whole 9 yards too. But the northern end typically, more often than not, will be better to you than the southern end, depending upon elevation changes on either side, north end or south end. But typically that north end is going to get more sun earlier because we are in the northern hemisphere, so the sun is towards our southern horizon or to the south. So that north end tends to warm up a little bit faster, and certainly ices out faster too. But then, depths and everything plays into it. General rule of thumb, north end is where we will start.
If I was to come out here, like legitimately, if I was to come out here and launch right here, I would probably spend most of my time in this area here on this big flat, probably closer to where it starts to drop off.
Bingo.
Because most of the time you're going to have this big flat, I'm guessing, has a bunch of vegetation on it. If it does, awesome. And then it would go out to where it would start to die off. Let's say this dropped off to like 12 to 15 feet right here.
From like 8 down to 12 to 15?
From like that 8 foot marks, and this was all 6 to 8 feet up in here. If this dropped down to like 12 to 15 feet right in here, and there was long grass all in here, and then it just died. As soon as it starts to drop off, I would work that edge right there and up on top of it, this whole area here. That transition area would be really good for those fish to move up, hang out in that grass, and just ambush anything that's moving from deep to shallow.
To expand on what he said, weather leading up to the day you choose to fish will play a huge, if not the most significant role in where you should be looking. If you have a warming trend, everywhere up here he talked about, that's the first area I'm going to look at, 100%. If you had relatively stable but still kind of cooler temperatures, so, lacking in that warming trend, water temps are still like 40, low 40s or whatever. If it's like that first day where it's kind of nice, I might look over here. And the reason for that is because...
that quick transition area.
Bingo, thank you. So that's a key area I would look. This is kind of another one. Like, it's kind of weird, though, because there's no, like, real consistency in the overall size of this flat. It's just kind of like a consistent change in depth the whole way up. But then if you come back down this... that might be an area I would look in. Absolutely. If you have a couple of warming days, this shallower flat up here, especially, there doesn't always have to be, but if you can find sporadic vegetation, of any kind and any intensity, for lack of a better way to put it, for how much there is there. If there's stuff up in here on this flat, then 100% I'm going to focus there. Then you kind of have this transition area, but it is a little bit of a stretch. But then you get
flat down there,
just slightly deeper. So like right now, thinking back to where we fished on Sunday, like this could have been a really good spot because it's in that in-between phase. Like it's a nice big flat. It's adjacent to some of the deeper water relative to this particular body of water, but it's a nice sizable area of consistent depth. And that might just be the right depth that they want to be hanging out in. But if they're kind of hanging around right around here, like look at how much area they have here. This would be 14 feet is this contour line. This is your 13-foot contour line. Maybe 12. No, sorry, 12, because the next 10, about 12-ish feet here, right? But in a very short distance, bam.
actually perfect for this time of year right now is this area up in here.
Again, depending upon weather, water temps and stuff, like warming trend, it's on the uprise. It's gone up a couple degrees. I'm coming up here. If it's fairly consistent, weather, water temp, like nothing's really changed. It's still kind of colder, lower 40s. I'm probably going to start looking in here, and I might actually focus in this area first, because if you like have a couple of days where it's warming, but you know, it only went up 5 degrees. But it's enough, you know, maybe the wind has died down. We have a lot of sunny days. So with the UV starting to get stronger this time of the year, it's going to have some form of an impact. Then I might focus in on here, because then they can move up the bank a little bit too if they want. Short distance here. Big, consistent area of depth, adjacent to deep water. They can move up really shallow. Like, they have all three things here in this one short stretch.
Yeah, that's like going from like high 30s to like low 40s. They moving up onto that first step there.
Yep, or just right around this transition area, yeah.
And then from like 40 to 42-ish, they may move up into there. And then from like the 42 to like 45 to 50 and up, they'll just keep moving up and up and up and up.
All the way up, yep. Although it's funny, right? Because if you get like one of those crazy good early spring warm fronts like we actually just had a couple weeks ago, right? I mean, it's still winter, but if you had open water and it had been open for a while, but your water was still like upper 30s, in like that 3-day stretch, it could have, body water the size could have jumped up 3 or 4 degrees in the span of 3 days. They could have moved from like, say, this area all the hell the way up here in one shot.
Like, oh, it's warming up. We're moving up shallow. Those bait fish are all moving up, so we're going to follow them.
Yep. So that's one really good example. You know what we should do? We should try and find a deeper body of water. Long Pond, Harwich. Never fished here. I've heard a lot of good things. This is actually another really good safe place to pick. This is a huge tournament water.
Yeah.
Like, so this is a great spot to pick, and it's deep, but it's not crazy deep. So, all right, if we're thinking smallies, early spring fishing, change gears here. A lot of what we talked about so far has been all about largemouth. Let's change gears for smallmouth.
Oh, Jesus.
I am curious where your first pick is, because your guess is as good as mine, because we have literally fished together for every early spring smallmouth trip.
I mean,
and it's a different animal when you're going for early spring smallies. We typically go for largies.
This spot could be really, really good. Just because there is deep water here, deep water here, deep water here. Everything kind of just funnels its way up.
Yeah, and inside of like a 50-foot swim, they could go from 7 feet to 50.
Right. I mean, if there's going to be fish around this area and here, they're most likely going to move up in here, up in here. Let's just say this is an inlet off a river, and there's pouring warm water in there. Say we got like a nice warmer water. We got a nice warmer rain, and this is pouring in. Those fish are probably going to push right up into this area here.
At what water temp would you say that would be most likely to start happening?
Probably low 50s.
I concur.
Smallmouth, I mean...
even largemouth.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of what we've seen on kettle ponds, too.
Yeah, true. It all translates to each other. But yeah, I would probably... If that was a river coming in with pushing in nice warm rainwater, warmer, this should be flooded with fish in here. I mean, all those bait fish are going to want to be in that warmer water. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be all sorts of stuff floating in the water where those bait fish can come up and eat. And those bass are just going to follow them right in and gobble them up. Especially if the water is a lot warmer than Main Lake, they're going to be up shallow in these areas where the fresh water is coming in.
I can tell you one spot I would be looking at. Okay, so if we're talking mid-40s, low to mid-40s, when they come out of winter, I feel like more often than not, they're still kind of towards mainland points. So this is a smaller body of water, though, so things might change. You're talking about bigger body of water, like thousands of acres. Mainland areas, not middle of the lake, tend to be much, much more consistent. Not saying that they can't be out there, but I'm just saying that that's been by far the most consistent spots for us to look. Still need to be closer to deeper water when it's there, especially when you're talking about smallmouth. The other added caveat when you're looking for early spring smallmouth is it needs to be very close or adjacent to areas that do offer at least some sort of sizable, consistent depth, which is why I'm going to look right here, because there's this little shelf. It's about 20 feet deep, so it's about the halfway point for the average max depth. I'm disregarding this 70-foot hole because it's an anomaly, right? You look at the rest of it, there's a considerable area of about 42 to 45 feet throughout this whole thing. And then you get this one little anomaly here that comes down to 70, but you still got 50 feet, high 30s. But if you come back up here, 40s, like a large area around 40. So your average max depth is about 40 to 43 feet, whatever you want to call it. So having something like this, where you do have a choke point for that deeper water, so depending upon what the bait fish are doing, how they're moving around, they're going to relate to these contours depending upon what depths they're at. They're going to have to come through here. There is a large ambush point. You have, I can zoom in a little bit here, large flat for them to rest on at varying depths too. You also have this consistent depth. If they want to move out over here a little bit where it starts to drop down a little bit deeper, they have a large area, but it's all adjacent to these sharp changes in depths in a very short period of time. But it also still offers a decent sized area of about 20 feet, about that halfway depth point for them. So like this is an area that I would look for to start. This is the other spot I saw. Oh, yeah, this is even better because you have a nice prolonged point that covers everything from the deeper-ist water, kind of some good transitions. They can ambush from either side. They do have a dwell area here. They have a dwell area here. They have another one. Like, look at how many different stages of dwelling / staging areas they have in one spot.
Mood they're in, they have a spot for it right there.
In a very, very short period of time. Now, like, structure and everything's going to dictate really where they're going to be, but again, we're making assumptions here just as a broad example of what would attract these fish to areas like this. Here's another great looking example of potential, generally speaking, again, not specific to this pond. You've got these dwell areas, these kind of staging areas, these transition areas. It's got variety of depths and transition points. They can move in and out fast. They can make changes with it. I'm trying to think, what would be another good example on here? I would look right here too. Like this is kind of another one. You got this sharp drop in a deeper water. You've got a nice, good, kind of relatively consistent area. This might be a little small, to be honest, but it comes up sharp up to the flat. But then it's also adjacent to a really, really steep drop right here, too. From very shallow to, again, some of the deeper average depth.
I mean, those aren't straight contour lines either. Like, that stuff is jagged and moving around. And if it's sand, it's most likely, like, kind of big and wavy. And those fish will hide down in those spots where it kind of tucks in like a little pocket.
Yep.
Waiting for bait fish to swim by where they can come out and get them.
See, like, I might go look at a spot like this, depending upon the conditions, if like, those other places aren't good. But there's not a huge area of consistent depth here. And, adjacent to it, it's a little bit shallower. What is that, 34 feet? Kind of at the bottom of this. So it's a little bit different. I mean, it certainly has potential, and I certainly wouldn't overlook it. It's not going to be my first point because I'm not seeing enough of an area here for them to be able to pick one particular depth that they can really share with a lot of fish. You know what I mean? So that spot I might not look at. Same with here for the same reasons. I'm seeing little bump outs and stuff, but it's not a very extensive area that shares that same depth.
I mean, you can get the idea, like even with deeper water into the shallower ponds, we're looking for those staging areas where they can just go from deep water up to shallow water, and from there they can go up to another shallow water flat staging area, whatever you want to call it.
So like these two spots right here, this 32-foot hole and this 30-ish foot hole, those are two other areas I'm going to look at. Look at this, has literally everything in this area, right? You've got a good dwell spot. It's actually a little bit deeper than the other one. Now we're at 30 feet, which, more often than not, when we're talking bodies of water that have this kind of average max depth, this is starting to look really, really good here for what we found for consistency in the depths we find smallmouth this time of the year. Really, really steep transitions here.
And if they want to go down to 60 feet of water, they can right there. All they got to do is go, 100 feet?
If that. Yeah, maybe like 200 feet from this point up into here, into this white area. Mm-hmm. But even if they don't want to go over that and they want to move around, they want to stay in that depth that they like to be in, let's call it 30 feet. Look at how much highway they have all along the front face of this. They can stay in 30 the whole way. And they have ambush points. They can hug up against that bank and dart out to get meals as they're going. All the way up and around here, kind of around the other side. They have another dwell area here. If that 30-foot all of a sudden becomes upwards of 25, 20 feet, they can just kind of roam this edge. They've got another dwell area here. Again, they've got another dwell area here at 30 feet. Like, trying to look at things like that. This is another spot, as it gets a little bit warmer, I would absolutely look at. A little bit of a warming trend. They might slide along this. They've got spots they can jump up, but they still have deeper water over here if they want. But they've got this really good sized dwell area. They can kind of come over this hump, a little hole here. So you've got these transition areas here. Like, again, there's so much more that goes into it for what would dictate where they would be. And a lot of that has to do bait, weather, what's available for them to ambush out of, to hold to. Although smallmouth tend to kind of roam the opens a little bit more often, but as long as there's bait and there's something for them to kind of find those happy transition areas, man, we keep coming back to that. But god damn, is it consistent? It is not the end all be all. I cannot stress that enough.
No,
but it
definitely
is
not.
deadly consistent.
Nailed it.
Hey, thanks. Trying to give you, which Andrew did a phenomenal job of, a general kind of overview of the areas you should be looking for and why. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate you.
But anyway, we will see you guys next week, like always, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at youtube.com/Reel Nothern Bass. We will see you next week.